I still remember the sound of my body hitting the marble floor, that sharp, echoing crack that made the room go silent. It was supposed to be a celebration. Charles had just closed $1 billion deal, and the mansion in Highland Park shimmered with champagne and gold laughter. I wore a simple blue dress, the one he used to say made me look like home. But that night, I wasn't home. I was a stranger in my own house. Alyssa, young, tall, glittering, leaned close and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Grace, maybe you should sit down. You don't belong in this crowd anymore." People laughed. I tried to keep my smile, but something inside me broke. I said quietly, "Alyssa, I've earned my place here long before you showed up." Her face twisted. "Oh, really?" she sneered. And before I could step back, she and two of her friends pushed me, hard. My heels slipped on the polished marble. I fell forward, face first. The cold floor cutting my lip, my palms scraped. I could taste blood. I looked up, searching for Charles. He stood there, glass of wine in hand, eyes empty. "Charles," I whispered. "They hurt me." He just sighed, turned slightly toward Alyssa, and said, "You're embarrassing me, Grace. Please just go home." The room fell quiet. The only sound was my own breathing, shaky, humiliated, alone. Someone took a photo. Someone else laughed softly, and as I tried to push myself up, Alyssa's heel nudged my shoulder. "Please," I said, voice trembling. "Don't kick me. I'm already hurt." No one helped me up. But that moment, that fall, was the beginning of my rise. I don't remember how long I stayed on that cold floor. Maybe a minute, maybe a lifetime. The marble smelled like spilled wine and expensive perfume. My blood left tiny stains on the edge of Charles's perfect world. People whispered, but no one helped. They were too afraid of losing his favor. That's what power does. It turns kindness into silence. I finally pushed myself up, shaking. My knees ached. My heart was louder than the music. Alyssa laughed and clung to Charles's arm like a prize. He didn't push her away. "Charles," I said again, my voice barely there. "You saw what she did." He turned toward me, calm, collected, cruel. "Grace, please. Don't make a scene." That sentence, it killed something inside me. I felt the cameras watching. The mansion had them everywhere for security. Funny how they caught everything except humanity. I looked around. Faces I'd known for years, business partners, old friends, pretended to check their phones. No one would meet my eyes. I walked to the door, my heels clicking against the marble, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the Texas night was cold. My reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. I remember whispering, "God, if you're still here, help me stand." And I did. Somehow I stood. The chauffeur tried to follow me, but I waved him off. I wanted no witnesses to my breaking. I drove myself to a quiet motel off Route 75, hands trembling on the wheel. That night I cried until the dawn came. Not because of the pain, but because the man I'd loved for 30 years had watched me fall and done nothing. What I didn't know was that one of the mansion's cameras, hidden behind a crystal sconce, had recorded everything. That footage would one day destroy them all. For 3 days, no one knew where I was. Not even Charles. Not that he cared. The tabloids wrote headlines like "Billionaire's Wife Missing After Party Meltdown." They called me unstable, dramatic, fragile. I read every word in silence, sitting alone in a cheap motel room with peeling wallpaper and a broken heater that coughed dust into the air. I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror anymore. Her face was bruised, lips swollen, eyes hollow. But beneath the damage, something else was there. Something fierce. I whispered to my reflection, "You survived worse, Grace. You'll survive this too." The phone on the nightstand buzzed. Daniel had called 17 times. Emily, 11. I couldn't answer. Not yet. They grew up thinking their father was a hero. I wasn't ready to be the one to break that illusion. On the 4th morning, I finally left the motel. The Texas sun hit my face like forgiveness. I drove north, passing fields of dry grass and billboards of Charles's company smiling back at me. Whitmore Developments, building tomorrow. It felt like mockery. I stopped at a small church outside Denton. The pastor didn't ask questions. He just handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Sometimes God hides us before he heals us." I cried, not because I believed, but because I wanted to. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't have to pretend. I could breathe without asking permission. No more perfect dinners, no more quiet suffering. I was free, but freedom felt like falling again. I stayed at the church's guest house for a week. At night, I'd sit outside watching the stars, wondering if Charles even noticed I was gone. Deep down, I knew. When I finally turned my phone back on, there was one message that made me stop breathing. It was from Daniel. "Mom?" he said, his voice breaking through the static. "I saw the video. I know everything." I dropped the phone, tears spilling down my face. My disappearance was over, but our fight for truth was only beginning. Daniel flew to Texas the next morning. He didn't tell anyone, not his firm, not even his sister. He just boarded the earliest flight from New York, anger burning hotter than the jet engines outside his window. He had seen the video, every second of it. His mother, his gentle, soft-spoken mother, on the ground, blood on her lip, while guests laughed and his father looked away. He played it again and again, each replay carving deeper into his chest. When he reached the church in Denton, I was standing by the garden, watering flowers. He didn't say a word at first. He just walked up and pulled me into his arms. "Mom," he whispered, voice shaking, "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." I tried to smile, but my hands trembled. "You shouldn't have to protect me, Daniel." He stepped back, eyes fierce. "I'm not protecting you, I'm avenging you." Later that night, Emily arrived. She'd left her newsroom in Austin without notice, driving 4 hours straight. Her mascara had run down her cheeks, her eyes red from crying. She threw her bag on the floor and said, "Dad's finished. He doesn't get to walk away from this." We sat together, the three of us, in the small kitchen lit by one flickering bulb. The silence was heavy. Finally, Emily spoke. "They humiliated you, Mom, publicly. We're going to make sure everyone knows who they really are." Daniel nodded. "We'll do it legally, through evidence, through exposure. You taught us better than revenge." I looked at them, my children, now grown, fierce and broken in all the same places I was, and I realized something. Maybe this was never about vengeance. Maybe it was about reclaiming the truth that power tried to bury. Outside, thunder rolled across the Texas sky. Daniel opened his laptop and Emily took out her recorder. They were already building the case, piece by piece, truth by truth. I watched them, my heart aching and proud all at once. They weren't just my children anymore. They were my justice. Charles moved faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, every major outlet in Dallas carried the same story. Grace Whitmore suffers emotional breakdown at gala. They said I'd been drinking. They said I'd attacked Alyssa. They said I'd imagined the whole thing. Money can buy silence, but it can also buy a louder lie. Alyssa went on a morning talk show, fake tears glistening under studio lights. "I never wanted to replace Grace," she said softly, her hand touching her heart. "But she needs help." The host nodded sympathetically. The audience clapped. I watched from the church's guest house, the coffee in my hand trembling. Every word felt like another shove to the floor. Daniel slammed his laptop shut. "He's controlling the narrative," he muttered. "Defamation, gaslighting, all of it. But it won't last. People forget headlines. They remember evidence." Emily leaned against the counter. "We have the footage, the raw video. That's our truth. We'll leak it when the time is right." Still, I couldn't stop the ache in my chest. "He's not just destroying me," I whispered. "He's destroying who I used to be." Daniel looked at me. "Then let him, because what's coming next? He can't control that." Meanwhile, Charles was throwing parties again, smiling for cameras, his hand resting proudly on Alyssa's back. Behind the scenes, he called my friends, our friends, and warned them not to contact me. "She's unwell," he said. "She needs treatment." They believed him. Or maybe they just believed his money. One night, I received a message from our old housekeeper, Maria. "They erased the footage, ma'am. But one copy. I kept it safe." My heart raced. A spark of hope. The truth had survived. I looked at Daniel and Emily, both exhausted but unbroken. "If he wants a war," I said quietly, "we'll give him one. But we'll fight with light, not mud." Emily smiled. "Then let's start shining it." And just like that, the billionaire's lie began to crumble, one hidden truth at a time. Emily always had her father's sharp mind, but she used it differently. Where Charles built empires on manipulation, she built truth from ashes. She knew that to expose Alyssa, she had to step into her world. Using her credentials as a journalist, Emily reached out to Alyssa's PR team under a fake name, Erin Blake, a writer for Modern Elite. She pitched a flattering feature, the woman beside the billionaire. Vanity and greed did the rest. Within days, Alyssa invited her to brunch at a rooftop cafe in downtown Dallas. "I just want people to see the real me," Alyssa purred, sipping champagne at 10 in the morning. Her sunglasses reflected the skyline and Emily's quiet disgust. "Oh, they will," Emily said, voice smooth. "They'll see everything." Through hidden mics and encrypted messages, Emily recorded every word. Alyssa bragged about the new investment fund she'd launched with Peter and Harold, Charles's closest business partners. She laughed when she mentioned offshore accounts and ghost investors. "Those idiots sign whatever I put in front of them," Alyssa said, twirling her glass. "Even Charles doesn't know how deep this goes." That single line changed everything. Back in the guest house, Emily replayed the recording for Daniel and me. Each word was a dagger. Daniel paced the room. "Money laundering, wire fraud. This isn't just scandal, it's criminal." I sat quietly, fingers clasped. "He chose these people over his family. Now they'll drag him down with them." Emily nodded. "Good. Let him drown in the company he kept." Over the next week, Emily kept meeting Alyssa, gaining her trust, pretending to admire her. Meanwhile, Daniel traced financial documents through shell companies in the Caymans and Panama. Every paper trail led back to Whitmore Developments. The puzzle was coming together. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was institutional, rotting from the top down. One night, Emily returned late, exhausted but glowing. She placed a flash drive on the table. "Everything's here," she said. "Emails, contracts, account numbers. It's enough to bring them all down." I looked at my daughter, pride swelling through pain. The same hands that once held crayons were now holding justice. Daniel had always been methodical, but I'd never seen that kind of focus in his eyes before, cold, relentless, and painfully calm. "If we're going to win this," he said, "we need proof stronger than words, something no one can twist." That's when Maria, our former housekeeper, called again. Her voice shook. "Ma'am, I didn't tell you everything. There's a backup system. Mr. Charles didn't know about it. The security company keeps one copy off-site in their private cloud." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "If that's true, we can get it, legally." The next morning, he drove to the company's headquarters in Plano. He introduced himself not as Charles's son, but as an attorney representing the family in a domestic dispute. It wasn't a lie, just selective truth. After hours of negotiation, paperwork, and a subtle threat of subpoena, they handed him an encrypted hard drive. When Daniel returned to the guest house that night, Emily and I were waiting by the old kitchen table. The drive looked ordinary, silver, scratched, small, but when Daniel plugged it in, the screen filled with blue folders marked by date and time. He clicked one. There it was. The gala, the laughter, Alyssa's hand shoving me forward, my body hitting the marble, Charles standing still, every frame, every sound. The truth in high definition. I covered my mouth as tears slid down my face. Not from pain this time, but from vindication. Emily whispered, "Mom, this is it. This is the file that ends them." Daniel copied everything onto a secure server, then locked the original drive in a safe deposit box under his name. "We move carefully," he said. "We don't leak it yet. We let them dig their own graves first." I watched my children, one calculating, one compassionate, working together like twin flames. I realized how power changes meaning when it's fueled by love instead of greed. For years, Charles believed silence made me weak. He never understood that silence is how strong people gather thunder. And now the storm was almost ready to break. Charles thought he had survived the storm. The press had quieted down, Alyssa was glowing again on magazine covers, and the world seemed to move on. But beneath that calm surface, my children were building a cage, one polished with truth and timing. It started with Emily's exclusive interview request. Under her journalist alias, she contacted Peter and Harold, Charles's longtime partners, pretending to prepare a profile on their philanthropic ventures. Greed makes men talk faster than guilt. During lunch at a private club, Peter bragged about a new charity fund tied to Alyssa's lifestyle brand. He didn't know Emily's recorder was running in her purse. "We move the money through her company," he said proudly. "Nobody checks when it's wrapped in glitter." Meanwhile, Daniel was coordinating quietly with the FBI's white-collar crime division. He'd sent them a confidential brief. Every transaction, every offshore account, every timestamp Emily uncovered. They didn't promise action, but they started watching. Then came the perfect bait. Alyssa announced an extravagant fundraising gala downtown, a public spectacle meant to clean her image. Celebrities, politicians, cameras. It was the same scene as my humiliation, but this time, the roles had reversed. When Emily showed me the invitation, my hands trembled. "You're not going," I said. She smiled softly. "I have to, Mom. Justice doesn't come to those who hide." On the night of the gala, Daniel monitored everything from a rented office nearby, screens glowing with live feeds from security cameras and undercover agents. Emily entered in a black dress, calm, confident, carrying a microphone instead of a weapon. I stayed home, pacing by the phone, whispering silent prayers. At exactly 9:14 p.m., Daniel texted, "They just transferred $5 million through the fake charity account. We've got them." And then, a minute later, FBI moving in. I froze. The sound of my own heartbeat filled the room. On one screen, Alyssa's perfect smile shattered as agents swarmed the ballroom. Peter and Harold were handcuffed. Guests gasped. Cameras flashed. Justice had finally walked into their world, wearing badges instead of gowns. The morning after the gala, every news channel in America was saying the same thing: Whitmore Associates under federal investigation. Footage flooded the screens. FBI agents escorting Peter and Harold out in handcuffs, Alyssa screaming as officers read her rights. Cameras caught everything: the diamonds, the tears, the collapse of their perfect illusion. But the most shocking image came later that afternoon. Charles Whitmore himself, stepping out of his Dallas office surrounded by agents. His trademark confidence was gone, replaced by confusion and disbelief. "There must be some mistake," he muttered to reporters. "I built this company with integrity." Integrity. The word almost made me laugh. I sat in the church kitchen watching it unfold on a small TV with Maria and Father John. Maria's hands trembled. "Ma'am," she whispered, "they finally see the truth." I nodded, silent. Inside, my heart was a storm. Not joy, just release. Across town, Daniel was giving his statement to federal prosecutors, carefully guiding them through every document, every piece of digital evidence. Emily stood outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters. She didn't speak, only handed them a USB drive labeled the Whitmore files. That night, Charles called me from a holding cell. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Grace," he said, voice breaking, "you have to help me. You know I didn't mean for this to happen." I let the silence hang heavy. Then I said quietly, "You meant for all of it to happen, except getting caught." He started to cry, the sound of a man realizing the empire he built was made of glass. When the call ended, I walked outside. The Texas night was cool, the same stars shining that once watched over our beginnings. I breathed deeply and whispered, "Justice doesn't need noise, it needs time." Behind me, the TV inside kept replaying his arrest. Reporters called it the fall of the billionaire. For me, it was something simpler. It was the first night in 30 years I finally slept without fear. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. Cameras waited outside like vultures, hungry for the downfall of a billionaire. Inside, it was colder than I expected, sterile, metallic, and unforgiving. Charles sat at the defense table, clean-shaven, wearing a navy suit that couldn't hide the weight he'd lost. Beside him, Alyssa stared straight ahead, wrists trembling. Her beauty, once blinding, looked desperate now, like a flame gasping for air. When the judge entered, everyone rose. I sat quietly in the back row, unseen beneath a black hat. I didn't need to be part of the spectacle. I just needed to hear the truth said out loud. The prosecution started with financial crimes, fraud, laundering, falsified donations. But then, unexpectedly, they called a surprise witness. "Maria Lopez," the clerk announced. My heart stopped. Maria walked to the stand, clutching her rosary. Her voice shook as she told the story of that night at the mansion. The laughter, the shove, the silence. And then she said the words I'd been waiting to hear. Mrs. Whitmore begged for help, but no one moved, not even her husband. The courtroom froze. The prosecutor nodded and turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just about money. It's about moral corruption so deep it believed it could silence a woman's pain." Charles shifted in his seat, jaw tight. Alyssa's eyes darted toward him, pleading for comfort that never came. Then the screen lit up. The footage. The original video from the gala. The sound of laughter. The shove. My body hitting the marble. The gasp from the audience was almost physical. Even the judge looked away for a moment. I closed my eyes, tears sliding down my cheeks, not from shame anymore, but release. When the lights came back, the room was silent. Charles stared at the screen like it was a mirror showing him his soul. For the first time, he couldn't lie. The trial wasn't over yet, but his legacy was. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. Every major network replayed the footage of me being shoved to the floor, the crowd laughing, and Charles standing still. Headlines screamed, "The man who let his wife fall." For decades, he controlled the narrative. Now the truth spoke for itself, uncut, unfiltered, undeniable. Talk shows analyzed every frame, legal experts debated morality. Even strangers online wept for the woman in the blue dress who whispered, "Please, don't kick me. I'm already hurt." That woman was me. I watched it unfold from my daughter's apartment in Austin. Emily sat beside me, scrolling through thousands of comments, women, men, survivors, all saying the same thing. "We see you, Grace." Daniel joined us, holding the morning paper. The front page showed Charles being led out of the courthouse, eyes down, face gray. The caption read, "From billionaire to betrayer." "He's finished," Daniel said quietly. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the sunlight spilling across the floor. The same light that once shone on marble, now warming a modest living room. "No," I said finally. "He's just beginning to understand." Outside, reporters surrounded the courthouse, demanding statements. Alyssa tried to speak but was drowned out by the crowd shouting, "Shame!" She pushed through the flashing cameras, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Charles stayed silent. For once there were no lawyers to save him. No spin to soften the truth. The empire he built on pride and deceit was crumbling, brick by brick, in full view of the world. That evening, a message arrived in my inbox from someone I didn't know. "Because of you, I left a man who hurt me. Thank you for standing." I cried quietly, not from pain, but from purpose. For years, I thought my voice had been erased. Now it was echoing across a world full of women who'd been told to stay quiet. Public backlash, they called it. I called it justice, with a heartbeat. The verdict day felt colder than any winter Texas had ever known. The courtroom was silent, thick with tension, every eye fixed on the jury as they filed in. 12 strangers now held the weight of 30 years of my life in their hands. Charles looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame. The man who once commanded boardrooms now clung to the edge of a table, like a drowning sailor to driftwood. Alyssa sat beside him, pale, mascara faded, her beauty withered by fear. The judge asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." My heart stopped. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. On the charge of money laundering, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. Each word fell like a hammer, steady and final. Charles exhaled sharply, his face collapsing into his hands. Alyssa began to sob. The judge continued, voice unwavering. "Charles Whitmore is sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Alyssa Grant, 8 years. Peter Lawson and Harold Brooks, 10 each." It was over. But it wasn't triumph I felt. It was release. The kind that comes when the world finally catches up to the truth you've carried alone for too long. Daniel squeezed my hand. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. Neither of us smiled. Justice, I realized, doesn't taste sweet. It tastes clean. When the judge dismissed the court, Charles turned to look at me. For a moment, I saw not the man who betrayed me, but the one I'd once loved. The man who used to bring me wildflowers from roadside stands. His lips parted, as if to say something, but the bailiff pulled him away. Outside, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken louder than I ever could. As I stepped into the sunlight, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the woman who fell. I felt like the woman who stood back up. A month after the verdict, I returned to the mansion for the first time. It was part of the settlement. The house was legally mine again. Funny how the law gives you back things your heart no longer wants. The security gate creaked open like it hadn't been touched in years. The driveway was littered with dry leaves. The fountain in the courtyard cracked and silent. Once, this place had glittered with light, laughter, and lies. Now it just echoed. I pushed open the front door. The air smelled of dust and old perfume. Sunlight slipped through half-drawn curtains, streaking across the marble floor, the same floor where I had fallen. I stood there for a long time, staring at that spot. It didn't hurt anymore. It was just history. I walked through each room slowly. The grand piano still sat in the corner, untuned and lonely. The dining table where Charles once toasted to love was covered in a fine layer of gray. In the master bedroom, the closet was empty except for a single cufflink, his. I placed it on the dresser and whispered, "You can keep your ghosts." Downstairs, I found an old photo album, us in our 20s, broke but happy. Daniel as a baby. Emily in her first recital dress. For a moment, I smiled. Then I closed the album and left it on the counter. The past could stay where it belonged. Outside, the Texas sky was golden. Maria waited by the car, eyes glistening. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to leave it like this?" I nodded. "Yes. It's just walls, Maria. The home I built is with them, my children." As we drove away, I didn't look back. Some endings don't need witnesses. They just need peace. Through the rearview mirror, I saw the mansion growing smaller, swallowed by the horizon. For years it had been my prison. Today, it became my proof that nothing built on cruelty ever stands forever. Healing didn't come with the verdict. It came slowly, like spring thawing after a long, bitter winter. I moved into a small house on the edge of Austin. Nothing grand, just warm. A white porch swing, a rose garden, and a kitchen that smelled of cinnamon and coffee. Peace had a sound I had forgotten, the sound of nothing breaking. Every morning I walked to a nearby women's shelter to volunteer. At first, I just listened. Women from every background, teachers, nurses, immigrants, young mothers, each one carrying stories that mirrored mine. Different faces, same silence. One afternoon, a woman named Lila sat beside me. Her husband had left her with 2 kids and a broken rib. She whispered, "How did you survive, Grace?" I thought for a long time before answering. By realizing I wasn't broken, just bent, and bends can straighten again. From that day, I started something new, the Blue Dress Foundation, named after the dress I wore the night I fell. Its mission was simple: to help women stand back up. Daniel handled the legal work. Emily managed the media outreach. We became a team again, not chasing revenge, but rebuilding hope. News outlets called me the billionaire's wife who fought back. But that title missed the truth. I wasn't fighting him anymore. I was fighting for them, the ones still trapped in rooms full of fear. Sometimes at night I'd sit on the porch swing, the Texas air soft against my skin, and I'd hear laughter from the inside. Emily cooking, Daniel teasing her. That sound healed me more than therapy ever could. One evening, Lila visited again, holding a small potted rose. "You helped me get a job," she said. "This is from my new garden." I smiled. "Then plant it here, let's watch it grow together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something profound. Justice ends in court, but healing begins at home. And after everything they took from me, I still had both. A year passed before I realized I was no longer surviving. I was living. The Blue Dress Foundation had grown faster than any of us expected. What began as a small local shelter became a network across 5 states. Volunteers, lawyers, therapists, even former victims, all united by one simple mission: to help women stand again. Emily turned out to be a natural leader. Watching her speak at conferences, confident and steady, made my chest ache with pride. She often ended her speeches the same way. "My mother taught me that silence is not peace, it's paralysis. Healing starts when you speak." Daniel managed the legal side, drafting protective legislation and funding resources for survivors. Law firms began donating time and expertise. For the first time in his career, he said, "I'm practicing law that matters." We moved our headquarters into an old brick building downtown. The paint was chipped, the ceilings high, and the light perfect. On the wall, Emily hung a framed photo of me in that blue dress. The night everything fell apart, beneath it she placed a small plaque, "From Pain, Power." Sometimes women would stop me in grocery stores or airports. They'd say, "You're her, right? The woman from the video?" I'd nod, a little embarrassed. Then they'd whisper, "Thank you. You made me leave." And I'd smile, because those were the words that mattered most. Charles's name was rarely spoken anymore. His trial had become a cautionary tale taught in ethics seminars. His empire was sold off piece by piece, his properties auctioned, his name erased from skyscrapers. But I didn't celebrate his ruin. I celebrated every sunrise, every quiet morning coffee, every woman who walked through our doors and out stronger. One afternoon, standing on that same porch swing, I whispered to myself, "You did it, Grace. You built something real." And as the wind rustled through the roses, I felt it, the weight finally gone. This wasn't revenge, it was resurrection. 2 years after the conviction, I received a letter with no return address. The handwriting was shaky, familiar. Inside was a single line written in blue ink. "I'm sorry, Grace. I don't have anyone left." I didn't need a signature. I knew. Charles Whitmore, once the man who dined with senators and flew private jets, was now living in a one-bedroom apartment above a pawnshop in Houston. The news mentioned he'd been released early for medical reasons. Heart condition, financial ruin, no family, no empire. Part of me thought I'd feel satisfaction. I didn't. I just felt a strange kind of stillness, like the echo after thunder. A month later, I visited him, not out of pity, out of closure. The nurse at the front desk led me to a small room that smelled of antiseptic and loneliness. Charles was sitting by the window, thinner, older, his once slicked hair now gray and unkempt. When he saw me, his lips trembled. "Grace," he whispered, as if saying my name hurt. "You came." I nodded. "You asked." He tried to stand, but his legs shook. I told him to sit. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "I lost everything. I thought I was building a kingdom, but it was a cage. I just didn't see it until it was gone." His eyes filled with tears. "Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at the man before me, not the monster, not the millionaire, just a broken soul facing the weight of his choices. "I already did," I said softly. "A long time ago. Forgiveness isn't for you, Charles. It's for me." He bowed his head, sobbing quietly. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Find peace while you still can." As I left, I didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind me like a final heartbeat. Outside, the sun was setting, warm and golden. I realized the story wasn't about revenge or even forgiveness. It was about freedom, and I had already won mine. 3 months after that letter, another call came. It was from the nurse. Her voice was gentle, hesitant. "Mrs. Whitmore, he doesn't have much time left. He keeps asking for you." For a moment, I said nothing. I looked out the window at the garden, blooming with roses. The ones Emily and I planted last spring. Life had grown from soil once watered by pain. "I'll come tomorrow," I said. When I arrived, the hospital was quiet. The air smelled like antiseptic and rain. They led me to a dimly lit room where Charles lay surrounded by machines that beeped like fading memories. He looked smaller, fragile, almost peaceful. When he saw me, his lips parted. "Grace," the word barely escaped. I sat beside him. He wanted to see me. His eyes glistened. "I didn't deserve you, not then, not ever." I said nothing. The silence between us felt different now, no longer heavy, just hollow. "I've lost everything," he continued. "The money, the houses, the friends. Even Alyssa stopped writing months ago. I guess she found another fool to love her lies." He gave a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "I just needed you to know. I remember the woman who believed in me before the world did. I ruined that." I reached for his hand. It was cold and trembling. "Charles, I don't hate you," I said softly. "I stopped hating you the moment I started healing." A tear rolled down his cheek. "Then maybe I can sleep now." The monitors beeped, slower, softer. I stayed until his breathing faded into stillness. No drama, no last words, just quiet. When I walked out, the sky was streaked with orange and gold. The wind carried the faint scent of rain and roses. I realized I didn't feel grief. I felt grace, pure, steady, unshakable. I whispered into the evening air, "Goodbye, Charles. May you find the peace you denied yourself." And as I left the hospital, I knew that chapter of my life had finally closed, for good. A year after Charles's passing, our home was filled with laughter again. The sound felt sacred, like music after silence. It was my birthday, though I'd stopped counting the years. Emily insisted on a party anyway. A celebration of survival, she called it. The house smelled of vanilla cake and roses. Daniel arrived first with his wife, carrying a giant bouquet. Emily followed with her little boy, Noah, my first grandchild, clutching a card he'd drawn himself. On it, stick figures held hands under a bright yellow sun. He'd written in wobbly letters, "Grandma Grace, stronger than heroes." When he handed it to me, I almost cried. "You're my sunshine, Noah," I whispered. He giggled and wrapped his tiny arms around my neck. The evening light spilled across the living room. Friends from the foundation came too, women whose lives had once been bruised, now laughing freely. Lila brought homemade pie, saying, "You saved me, Grace." I smiled. "No, you saved yourself. I just handed you a mirror." As the night deepened, Emily raised a glass. "To my mother," she said, her voice trembling. "You taught us that dignity isn't something people give, it's something we reclaim. Because of you, hundreds of women are standing today." Everyone clapped softly. I felt warmth rise through me, a slow, gentle pride that reached every scar. After dinner, we went outside. Fireflies glowed across the garden like scattered stars. Noah pointed upward. "Grandpa's up there, right?" I hesitated, then smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, and maybe now he's learning what love really means." Daniel put his arm around my shoulders. "You did it, Mom," he said quietly. "You turned pain into purpose." I looked at my children, my grandson, my friends, the family I had rebuilt not from wealth or power, but from truth. The circle of light around me felt complete. The past no longer haunted me, it humbled me. Every wound had become a window letting the light in. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, life, for giving me back everything I thought I'd lost." And under that Texas sky, surrounded by laughter, I finally felt whole. I used to think my story ended the night I fell on that marble floor. But now I know, it was only the beginning. 5 years have passed. The Blue Dress Foundation has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We've opened shelters across the country, funded scholarships, and passed 2 major laws protecting women from financial and emotional abuse. My name, once whispered in pity, is now spoken in gratitude. Sometimes I visit the Women's Center quietly, without notice. I walk through the halls and hear laughter, children playing, women studying for their GEDs, learning computer skills, starting over. That sound, it's the music of rebirth. On one wall hangs a mural painted by survivors. In the center, a woman stands tall in a blue dress, surrounded by light. Beneath it are the words, "She fell, but she rose higher." Every time I see it, my heart catches. That woman isn't just me, it's every woman who's ever been silenced, doubted, or dismissed. Emily now runs the foundation full-time, and Daniel works pro bono for victims who can't afford justice. Watching them gives me peace. They didn't just inherit my pain, they transformed it into purpose. I live quietly in Austin now. My garden is full of roses, their petals soft as forgiveness. On quiet mornings, I write letters to my younger self, the woman who begged, "Please don't kick me. I'm already hurt." I tell her she was stronger than she knew, braver than she believed, and destined for more than survival. Sometimes I still get messages from strangers around the world. "Your story saved me." I read each one, tears of gratitude in my eyes. If you're listening to this now, maybe you're where I once was. Please remember, kindness is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. And even when the world knocks you down, you can rise again, taller than before. Because healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering and choosing peace anyway. If you've stayed with me till the end, thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for every woman who fell and stood back up.